Supreme Court judges, I want to thank you for involving us in this work. I want to commend you on not just this conference, but the entire initiative. It is an absolute perfect model for the rest of the country. And I want to offer our continuing assistance to you. Nebraska has a long-standing relationship with the National Council. The second judge from your court serving as president, still serving, Judge Johnson, Judge Rouse served as president some years ago. Okay, a couple of disclaimers. I'm just a guy with a PowerPoint presentation faculty badge. I'm not necessarily an expert, and certainly I'm not an expert on Nebraska law or the way you do business in Nebraska. I learned a lot about it yesterday in my session with the judges on the on the guidelines, but I'm certainly not an expert. I do want to say this though, and I say this with some humility, is that I do have to offer some credentials for standing before you and suggesting some ways that you think about doing business. And that comes from two perspectives, for two reasons. One is that in my county, which is the county of 60,000, Tripp County, Georgia, 3 years ago we had 235 children in care. Yesterday I reported to the judges that we had 77 children in care, and I was wrong. I called my director this morning, we talked, and as of today we have 67 children in care. If we continue controlling the number of children coming into care for the rest of this year, as we have for the last year and a half, same average, and we can move out of care the children we have scheduled to move out of care at the December 31st, depending on the hearing of some courts that I can't control for adoptions, we will have between 58 and 62 children in care. So for that reason, I think I can make some suggestions. The second reason I think I can make some suggestions is I'm not foolish enough to take credit for that. I recognize that that is not a result of what I have done. It's a result of what we have done in our court through initiatives like this. We hold monthly stakeholder meetings, and we talk about how to improve the system. And I think having done it through that process, the same way you're doing it now, I think gives me some credentials to stand here and make some suggestions, just to get people thinking. That's all I'm trying to do. You are the experts. You guys do it every day. I want you to know where I'm coming from. And I told this to the judges yesterday, and you may not agree with me. I take a very expansive view of judicial oversight. You really can't hang around the National Council much and not do it. I believe that it's my responsibility to fill gaps in the system. Unless there's authority to the contrary, I assume that I have not only the authority, but the responsibility to fill those gaps. Does not mean that I'm a case manager. I've been accused of it, being a case manager from the bench. But it's my responsibility through judicial leadership and collaboration with other partners to ensure that those gaps are filled. Now, when we talk about regional efforts, sometimes people don't like what I say. And I saw a movie one time where there's this band playing in a nightclub, and if the people didn't like the music, they threw beer bottles and such at the band. Well, I don't think any beer bottles here, but there's certainly some apple juice cans and some water bottles. So I wore a red tie. Go red. Big red. Big red? Big red. And I went to Skagway yesterday. I couldn't find any chicken wire. But you guys would never throw anything at this. So we're going to... These are just some things that I was thinking about in Nebraska since I've been here, based on some things that I just came here with and some things that I thought about since I've had the great opportunity to meet with some of you guys. Regional efforts is everybody's business. I know that under the statute, under state and federal law, it's the department that's required to make regional efforts to do various things. But it's everybody's business. It's everybody's business to hold the agency accountable. Lawyers for parents, lawyers for children. It's also everybody's business to support the agency in providing those services. It's inappropriate to sit back and criticize the agency for not providing services, not doing their job, if you're not willing to join hands with them and get the work. That's what I call reciprocal accountability. Now, judges out here that have this jurisdiction, as I understand, are elected. And we're appointed by Superior Court judges in Georgia. But I don't think it makes much difference. Based on my experience, nobody holds us accountable for the work we do, or we're judges now, unless it's the people that work in our courts. My experience has been in the work that we do, the voters just don't much know. They don't much care. They don't select their judges based on their average time in care. That's just not how they select judges. That's how they look on the, in the brochures and on TV and what they say about other things. It's all politics, like so many others. It's not based on the actual work that the judge does. So we have to look to the people in our court to hold us accountable. And that's true in terms of time frames for hearings and everything else, the findings that we're supposed to make. So we look, I challenge you to hold your judges accountable. Okay. This is one that just kind of came to me yesterday since I've been here. And I'm not here to criticize anybody. I have way too many kids in care. Way too many kids in care. And 2 years ago, I was told the number of kids I had in care more than 18 months, and I really got nauseous. I've done a really bad job with judging. So I'm not here to criticize anyone, but I did hear some statistics since I've been here about the length of time it takes to get a hearing. And that's a pretty long time. I've heard discussions about how long it takes to get services delivered, whether the judges can order services to be delivered early in the case or not, and what control we have. Delaying hearings, reviews, and delivery of services is like foregoing prenatal care and worrying about the baby when it gets here. It's just that simple. The baby's going to get here, maybe. The baby might not survive without prenatal care. The work that we do from day one of the case is the very formative time in the case. I don't know how we can delay doing the work beyond that. And to me, this is a growing good now. People simply talking about children. If I had a vote, and I don't, I would vote on your list for expedited hearings, increased oversight, and more proactive legal representation. I took a look at those things this morning. I lost my list. So I had to write them out. Run down here. I just want to look at it. But fewer children in care, re-entry care is not one necessarily that you can affect by expediting your hearings and delivery of services. TPRs more quickly, absolutely. So you're going to accomplish that goal if you just have more expedited hearings. Completing adoption within 6 months. You're going to complete that. You're going to meet that goal if you just have expedited hearings. Increased engaging of non-resident fathers. You have to go to Howard session this afternoon, but I suggest to you that you're going to accomplish that if you have earlier hearings, because you're going to work earlier on the case. You have some judicial oversight early on the case to make certain we're doing what we should do to find those fathers and engage them in the child's life. Time unification will be reduced if you just expedite services, expedite hearings and deliver services early. I could go all the way down the list. There are only 2 other things on the nine that would not be positively impacted if you just expedite your hearings. I'm going to talk about that a little bit in detail later. You know, like Howard, we have a lot of time for this. And I really regret the good news and bad news. The good news is you don't get a chance to talk back to it. Okay? And I know you have some things you want to say. The bad news is you don't have a chance to talk back to it. And I would love to have the opportunity to do that as we did in the judges' conference yesterday. And I'm sure we will do in the next hour. And another thing, I cannot speak to total privatization. We have a lot of privatization. Certain parts of our work in Georgia are not total privatization. But I've given this a lot of thought. And I spent a breakfast meeting with our state agency director a few weeks ago talking about this issue. And he agrees with my position. And that is that privatization does not make what I'm going to say about reasonable efforts irrelevant. You cannot abdicate your responsibility for reasonable efforts by passing it off to a private agency. At a minimum, you have the responsibility to building into those contracts with service providers reasonable efforts components, time frames, services, quality of services, and all those sorts of things, availability of services. That becomes your responsibility together with monitoring those services and providing information back to the court. You can't abdicate that responsibility. There's nothing in ASPA that holds the service providers responsible for reasonable efforts. And you have your Kansas judges coming this afternoon. Any of them here that's going to present this afternoon? There are 4 of them, I think, will present this afternoon on their experience. Maybe they have a different view about that. Culture of Excellence, this is a quote from the National Council of Books, and you can read it. It's in your materials that we sent out earlier. But this is what we want to create. We can do it through judicial leadership. The judges have to set expectations and have to model good practices on the bench to get that way. This is our law. I love this. This is a statement about your reasonable efforts responsibilities. And the pieces I want to pick out is we talk about intervening in the lives of families and the least intrusive. And what that means, the least intrusive the least intrusive method is that we provide services that to support the family, not to supplant the family. That's what that means. It also talks about least restrictive. What that means is to the extent that we can and still get the work done, we let children be children and families be families. And lastly, it talks about delivering services in close proximity to the home community. That means that we maintain connections. We allow the children to maintain connections to their families, their community, their schools, and their friends. And this is the framework within which reasonable efforts and services that we offer should be delivered. Now, you had this in your materials, it's kind of the title. This is my definition of reasonable efforts that I've used before. It's doing for the families and children we serve that which we would want others to do for us and our families if we found ourselves in like circumstances. It's very similar to what Doug was quoted saying yesterday by Judge Tucker. But that's what I used to refer to as the golden rule, as an aspiration, because I was told it was aspirational, but I'm not quite sure it is. I think it very well may be definitive. We'll talk about that more as we go through. But this is the framework for the discussion. I don't have time to talk about historical perspectives. This is what I plan on the presentation being, that we just don't have time for that. The only thing I want to say about the historical perspective of the law is the trend has been, as you can see from Howard's presentation, the trend has been for more judicial oversight, tighter time frames, and now more connection to family or maintaining connections. That's been the trend from public law. Well, actually goes back to the original Capital Act and public law 96-272 and 1980, ASPA in 1997, and now foster connections. And we're going to talk about these other things as we go through. Highly funding, you know what it is, and I'll spend a lot of time on that. It's critical to our state. The feds hang this carrot out there, and they say, if you're going to get our federal money, you got to do business this way. Some people criticize that. That's not a bad thing, because the feds have put out some pretty good practices out there, and they've done some pretty good things to enable us to do our work. They don't tell us in detail, they don't micromanage how we do our work. They provide the framework within which we have to do our work in order to get these federal dollars. And they did it because we weren't doing it ourselves. We didn't complain about that. When you look to the federal law and state law, this came out of the final rule to look at the judge's oversight responsibilities. And if you do a word search of the final rule, if you've ever bothered to look at that, this is what you get. It's judicial oversight against unnecessary removals and acts as a safeguard against potential inappropriate action. And these are our responsibilities here for oversight. And one of those is to review the state agency's reasonable efforts to prevent removal from the home, reunify the child and family, and finalize permanent placements. And all this has found its way, of course, into Nebraska law. We don't have time to talk about contrary to the welfare findings. The only thing is to tell you, you got to make those findings. They got to be based on the evidence. They got to be documented in orders, or you're really hurting this child, this family, and your state budget. Because what happens there, if you don't, judges, if you don't make that finding and put it in your orders, you lose 4 years funding for that child, the entire episode in care. It's not one of those things that can be fixed, like some of the findings. It takes forever. The entire episode in care. This just tells you why the consequences are so severe. Now, this is the first reasonable efforts piece that we're going to talk about. And this is out of your statute. Except where expressly excluded from the statute, reasonable efforts shall be made to preserve or reunify families prior to placement of juvenile in foster care, to prevent or eliminate the need for removing the juvenile from the juvenile's home, and to make it possible for the juvenile to return safely to the home. The statute. Also on this finding, it's so critical. Not only that you provide the services to avoid removal, but that the judge also makes the appropriate findings and documents it. This is another area where if you fail to provide, if the judge finds you did not provide the services where services were required, or fails to document them, then that child is ineligible for FOIA funding for the life of the entire episode in care. Very critical this be done, not just to protect the money, but to protect the child. And this talks about why the rule is that way. It just talks about the fact that you can't unring the bell. Once you remove the child from care, then the child's been removed. You've done the harm, and you can't remove the consequences of it. Just in the I'll say this very quickly about the contrary to the welfare determination. As we all know, the child is facing some risk of harm in the home, and the child should never be removed. Should never be considered for removal. He or she is facing some risk of harm. We also know, though, that children are harmed by the removal itself. And in the old days, until they changed our risk assessment, we had a card, defects had a card, I used to carry it a lot. That on one side, it had the risk factors to consider making removal decisions. And on the flip side, it had controlling interventions, they call them, things we can do to keep that child at home. And so many times, literally, they failed to flip the card open. Figuratively, they failed to flip the card open. They saw the risk and took the child out of the home without providing the services on the flip side of that card. At this stage, you can't do that. You have to balance that interest. You have to do what you can do to keep the child at home, recognize the child's going to be harmed by removal, and you have to make those very, very hard decisions. Which one protects the child most? This is our year statute too. I thought it was interesting that this talks about continuation of reasonable efforts to preserve young families determined to be inconsistent with terms of the plan as you're doing something else. It says that an effort shall be made to place the juvenile in a timely manner in accordance with the terms of the plan and to complete the steps to finalize. I think they left the word reasonable out, but it kind of has to be in there. So that's certainly from a funding standpoint. Let me say this too. I don't consider myself an authority on reasonable efforts supporting funding either. I'm just talking. But certainly not an authority on Nebraska law. I can't tell you whether a judge can order certain things or not. I can't tell you. I can tell you to some extent of what impact that would have on funding. And this is an area where if you don't make those reasonable efforts, it's going to have an impact. Whether or not it's Nebraska. So again, we talk about asking again, aspirational definition. Is there anything between reasonable and unreasonable? This is a fun discussion sometimes we talk about. I don't know if there is or not. I don't see how there could be. The two together seem to encompass everything. Everything is either reasonable or unreasonable. But there doesn't seem to be the room between them either. It has to be either one or the other. I don't think it can be a relative term. So what I like to do looking at reasonable efforts is to turn the question upside down. If it is not unreasonable to ask the agency to provide a service, then is the failure to provide the service a failure to make reasonable efforts? And maybe that's the real question we should ask as an agency when you're doing your internal work. And maybe it's the real question we should ask as judges when we're making a decision, is what the service we're asking the agency to provide, is it unreasonable to ask for that? And if it's just not unreasonable to ask for it, then the failure to do it is unreasonable. It's a failure to make reasonable efforts. It's kind of how I get it. And if you use that, and you ask the question, is the aspirational definition a definitive definition, it may take on a different one. Let's try to get some specifics. We're going to talk about examples of no reasonable efforts, findings, and questions to be addressed to avoid removal, to reunify, and effect an alternative placement, because that's what the placement requirement on the law. Now, these are some questions to give you a sense of the time we have of the time we have to how I approach the questions. We're at an emergency hearing. We call them 72-hour hearings, removal hearings, detention hearings, shelter care hearings, whatever you might call it, protective custody hearings. Where you're making that initial determination of whether or not the agency made reasonable efforts to avoid removal of a child from home. These are some questions that I would suggest should be answered. Number one, what are the circumstances or conditions which cause the child to have been removed? And let me say this, that the work that we do structurally is pretty simple. Now, the facts that operate within that structure are pretty complicated. Some people say it's not brain surgery, it's much more complicated than that. It's probably true. But the structure is pretty simple. We have to decide, based on evidence presented in court, all due process attached, the reasons why a child cannot be maintained at home safely. That's a judicial determination based on evidence, not based on what a case manager might know, not based on what a police officer might know, not based on what's in the petition. It all has to be based on evidence. We're taking a child out of a family with certain constitutional implications of that. So it has to be based on the evidence presented in court. And the judge hears the evidence and makes that determination. That determination then becomes the foundation for developing case plans and making decisions of when the child can be returned home safely. Because we determine the reason the child can't be maintained home safely. And then we have to determine what changes have to take place in the child, the family, or the home in order to allow that child to return home safely. And then what steps have to take place to affect that change. I mean, it's really just that simple. Again, the facts operate within that. So this has to be determined, and the specific harm that may have occurred if the child remained at home. What services were offered to avoid removal? Pretty simple so far, that part. What services were in fact provided to avoid removal? Sometimes they're offered and not accessed by the parents. Particularly if you've been working a family preservation plan to try to work, I don't know if you call it that, child protective services. I use the term family preservation, but that's what we do in calling it in Georgia. But if you're working a family preservation plan, you offer services, and the family had not accessed those services, and now we have a crisis that's got to be removed. Yeah, those are the services that you offer. It gets more complicated. What services, if any, could have avoided the removal? Because I tell you, a lot of judges stop asking the question that what services were offered. They stop asking this question. Truth be known, a lot of you guys stop doing the work there. But you have to, the judge should ask that question. What services, if any, could have avoided the removal from the home? To the extent that there were services that could have been offered that could have avoided removal, why weren't they offered? And if there were services that could have been offered and just weren't offered, that's a failure to make reasonable efforts to avoid the removal. I'm sorry, but you messed up. That child is now the responsibility, the entire responsibility of the state. No federal assistance to care for that child. To the extent that services were not available, has the agency made reasonable efforts to identify needed resources to avoid removal of the child from the home? And this is one where a lot of judges really don't like to go. And but I would encourage you to go there because you can drive some improvement in the system. And I would encourage the agencies to do it. And I didn't make this stuff up, just to let y'all know that. This is I call it something. I call it Tier 2 reasonable efforts, but it really comes out of this book, Making Reasonable Efforts, Steps for Keeping Families Together. That was done by the National Council, Child Welfare League of America, and Youth Law Center, National Center for Youth Law. I can't find the date in it, but it was post public law 96 272, which was in 1980, and it was pre-resource guidelines and certainly pre-ASPA. So I assume it was some kind of time. And all this is still applies because what ASPA has done is build on top of that law. It didn't take it really anything away. It's built on top of it. And what this book says is that the agency has a responsibility to developing a state plan that ensures the delivery of services to keep families together and to reunite families when they have to be separated. The third piece came later on with that. That's required time. They have a responsibility to do that. And it actually goes in here and lists all the services that have to be made available to provide these services. So if the agency fails to take an ongoing inventory of services that are needed to keep families together and to reunite families, and they fail to fill the gaps in those services, that's a failure to make reasonable efforts in this individual case. And the state plan requirements are different. And I know Joan knows a whole lot about this matter. But you got the state plan, and that affects certain kinds of funding issues. And then you've got the individual child issue, which are the 4E issues. But I would suggest to you that if as part of the development of your state plan to deliver services to the families to keep them together and reunite them when they have to be separated, you fail to provide for these services, and because of that failure in the individual case, you do not have that service available, that's the failure to make reasonable efforts in this case. So you should ask your agency if they're inventorying those services and filling those gaps in services. And if they're not, then they are not making reasonable efforts. Now, should you do it in the next hearing? Probably not. You haven't been doing it in the last 20 years. You probably shouldn't start now. This is for the collaboration piece. You need to work with them to help them develop services. Judges can bring people to the table to solve problems and deliver services that other people can't do as easily. And I'll tell you one quick example of that. Is that we have a lot in our county. This is one of the most recent and best examples. Last September, the county director and I called every service provider that provides psychological evaluations for our parents and our children on the link side of the court to a meeting through the jury box. And we talked to them about ASPA, time frames, the need for early intervention in cases. And by doing that, then now if the child is removed today, then within 2 weeks, that parent, if they agree to accept the services, are sitting for psychological evaluation in 2 weeks. A week later, we have at least a recommendation sheet from the psychologist, not the full report within 30 days, we have the full psychological. And that's good stuff. And we did that through collaboration. Now, I could not have just my agency might not could have done that on its own without me calling the meeting and helping these people understand the implications of not providing those services early. So anyway, this is the question that we should ask. Have there been any prior referrals or agency involvement? This is another place that judges don't like to go, and quite honestly, the court in Georgia at least, and I don't think nationally, based on research a friend of mine did, have gone here either. And that is, we asked the question, have there been any prior referrals or agency involvement? If there have been prior referrals or agency involvement, were the attendant circumstances or conditions sufficient to put the agency on notice of the underlying issues that would likely result in a later removal, but for the provision of appropriate services? Now, it is my view that in making reasonable efforts determinations on the front end, we have to look at the entire history of the case, the entire life of the case, every time this agency touched the family. And if the failure to provide services on previous contact resulted ultimately in removal of this child, that's a failure to make reasonable efforts if they did not provide appropriate services. And a very quick example I gave the judges yesterday, one of the most tragic that I've ever seen. Within June, we had a 14-year-old young girl who attempted suicide. We found out that the reason she did that is that her mother's now ex-boyfriend had been molesting her over a period of time, a long period of years, and the mother knew about it and did not protect her. She attempted suicide. Agency came in, looked at it, safety planned the child with grandmother. The grandmother promised to get services. They closed their case. In November, she came closer on a second attempt to taking her life. And I found the agency failed to make reasonable efforts. The reason is they really didn't do a good job investigating that case. They didn't ask a lot of questions. Number one, and most critical fact, they found out that this child had been with grandmother on and off her entire life, and she'd never stayed with her. Grandmother also was not responsible enough to ensure the child got services. So what happened is just a few weeks after the child was safe to come with grandmother, she was back with mother. Absolutely no services provided, never went to a counselor. She continued to try to deal with those problems on her own, and she tried to take her own life. Had the agency investigated the case properly, provided appropriate services, that probably would not have happened. So I made a no reasonable efforts finding. The agency was going to appeal it. I wish they had. But when we finally got dad to step up to the plate and take the child and help provide services, now with assistance of the agency, then the agency lost interest because it no longer affected the pocketbook. So they didn't really care about the decision anymore. I wish they had, because I would like to know what the law is on. So if the appellate court from the otherwise, I think that's an appropriate inquiry for the court. Now, these are some questions I've already talked about that. I didn't try to provide the time, and I think that would be no reasonable efforts. That's why I wish we had time to talk about that. I'd love to hear what some of the agency folks have to say about it. There are three separate issues in avoiding removals we talked about. You might have sensed Commissioner went through. One is providing available services. The other is making services available, and third is prior contact. Those are all three appropriate areas for inquiry, I think, the judges to make. These are examples of no reasonable efforts to avoid removal finding. Failure to investigate the case properly. Failure to provide appropriate services for a sufficient period of time. I don't mean till the money runs out. I don't want to hear this thing about money running out. I would just tell you, there are too many pots of money out there. There are too many ways to do it. And I will tell you this too, if you reduce your number of kids in care from 235 to 67, you're going to have more resources to deal with those kids that you have. So, and I don't, quite honestly, Judge, I love you to death, but I don't want to hear about this thing about not having time on my docket either. Because if you find time on your docket early on in the case, you're going to have a lot of time down the road. I've got 67 kids in care instead of 235. I've got a lot more time on my docket than I've ever had. My concern now is that the agency at the state level is going to start taking case managers away from me. That my county is going to start saying, well, Judge, you know, you don't have the cases you had before. We're going to cut your resources. That's my concern. That's a good problem to have. But that's where you can get a front-end loading system. The failure to effectively safety plan. The key to safety planning is providing services, not just parking a kid over here somewhere, but providing services for that underlying problem step. Failure to seek protective order prior to delivery of services. I can't go back. Okay, yeah. Those are basically the quick examples I gave on the, there are a lot more, but those are quick examples I gave on removal. Let's move now to some questions to be addressed on reunifying families. And they're very similar, you're going to see as we go through it. And basically, again, is, you know, what is the reason now? We've already talked about the reason why the child could not be maintained home safety in the first instance. So one of the reasons now why a child can't be returned home safely, they should be the same. Once we've got some new evidence to develop that. And you know what happens? We can have an issue of homelessness, failure to get medical care, those kinds of things early in the case, only to find out as we get deeper in that there's a substance abuse problem. We know that it can happen. So on an ongoing basis, what's the reason the child can't be safely returned to the home? What services are being offered to reduce the risk at an appropriate level? The services reasonably calculated to reduce the risk. And this is where we do some reverse case planning to look at it. We already talked earlier about the framework within which we operate. And the case plan should offer services. The basic characteristics, I think, of a good case plan are simplicity, specificity, accountability, relativity, and doability. The case plan has to be simple. It has to be specific in terms of what has to be done. A real important thing is the relativity. I made that word up. It's not spell check and execute it every time I do PowerPoint. But what it means is that the services that we're offering are reasonably calculated to reduce the risk that we've identified. There's a relationship between the two, and that's required. When I first started doing this, every mom was required to get a GED. That's a pretty cool thing. She should get a GED. She doesn't have one. But that doesn't mean she can't keep her child home safely just because she doesn't have it. So they need to relate to it, and they need to be reasonably calculated to reduce the risk. So we need to kind of go backwards in the case at this point as we're reviewing the cases to see if they're really doing that. To do that, we have to ask the question of the services being offered in a timely, accessible, culturally, and developmentally appropriate manner. You can't have a mom with 65 IQ that goes to most of the parenting classes that we have. We have no parenting classes here. We don't do any parenting classes in our town. We do in-home parent skill development instead of parenting classes, and we do it at the appropriate developmental stage for that parent. And we have to, the accessibility is pretty good. I don't know about you guys. I know some of you are in rural areas. We're not really rural. I don't know what we are. Some people call it exurban. I don't even know what that means. We're not suburban. We're not rural. We're not urban. We're just kind of out there. But we have transportation problems. We have 3 cities, the county seat, and then 2 smaller cities on each end of the county. And most services are offered in the county seat. Transportation is a huge, huge issue for us. So we try to go while the desired outcomes being achieved. Now that's something the case managers need to know, obviously. Something the judge needs to know. It's something that your state review panel needs to know. And you got to get the information back. When I get it back, a lot of times I'll find that the counselor is doing a really, really good job of providing a lot of services and making a lot of progress with mom, but not on the issues that cause the child from the care. You know? So you got to tie those things together, and that's a piece that we actually hope to work with the Casey Foundation on developing some benchmarks for judges on asking the right questions, and service providers better understanding after time frames and things like that, so we can do a better job of linking those. Judges need to ask these questions. And let me say this too. What I would encourage I assume we have some management folks from the agencies here, not just case managers, but the supervisors and people like that here too. This should not be the first time the case manager hears this question. Right? They should hear that question to staffing before they ever come see me. I mean, some of you guys know your case manager comes to us. I'm not telling you. They know a lot about their cases, but they're not prepared to answer my questions when they come to them. They're not prepared to answer the parents' lawyer's questions or the child's lawyer's questions when they come to them. So you got to staff these cases better, take care of the cases before you send them down. They should have been asked these questions before they come. They should have been answered. Are the desired outcomes being achieved? This is something we have to know. Case managers need to know it on a regular basis. The courts and the review panels need to know when the cases are heard. These are the same questions before. What additional services could be offered to reunite the family? To the extent that there are such services, why are they not offered? The same drill we went through before. Okay? We talked about that before. If there's services out there that could get this family back together, and you're not providing those services, and you've not made reasonable efforts to develop those services, you're not making reasonable efforts to reunite this family. That should be important. Now let me tell you, I don't know if we talked about consequences earlier. This was a little different. On this reasonable efforts finding about the court, if I make a no reasonable efforts finding, then that child is not eligible for funding at that point. But it can be reinstituted. We're going to talk about giving an opportunity to cure a little bit later. It can be reinstituted. So it's not as kind of fatal funding as the upfront determinations are. That's the same group. Got to develop these. These are examples. Failure to develop case plan around the court's findings after cause of separation. We'll talk about that. Failure to conduct proper assessments. The assessments and evaluations are integral to the development of the case plan. Has to be case plan. Failure to match services with needs. I love to train on case plan development and interactive session. I do it about 3 or 4 hours, but it's a lot of fun to do that, and I learn a lot, and hope that everybody does the process. Expecting too much out of parents too early in the case. Now, this is a fun debate too, but in my court, it's not a debate at all. Don't tell me that we took a child away from parents last week. Now I expect that parent to make the appointment with a psychologist and to get there herself the evaluation. We took that child away from the parent for a reason. It was because the parent's not going to take care of the business, and we're not going to fix that just by taking the child away. Early on in the case, we got to hold that parent's hand and get them the services. Yes, there reaches a point in the case where we have to expect the parent to take the initiative and to demonstrate they can do this in their home, but it's not in the first 30 days following the move. But no parents out back home. But I will tell you this, we brought a statewide stakeholder group together to work on this. We brought folks from National Council, we brought folks from National Council. We had 4 psychologists involved in the program, 2 of them legislators. And together, one of the things that we're on unanimously is that the failure to provide meaningful visitation for families in and out itself is a failure to make reasonable efforts to reunite that family where reunification is to go. Period. End story. Now, if you start doing that, and your agency says, well, we don't have the resources to provide the transportation, you make that finding, let your county director take 42 of those orders to the state office and tell them about that. They will find a way to provide transportation and supervision for your visitation. That's another point I want to make too, is that sometimes, I know you don't believe this, you're an agency, I say it, we're doing you a favor a lot of times by making no reasonable efforts to find it, certainly on the county level. Because you can take the state office and say, this crazy judge I got down here is hearing evidence and saying we're not doing a good job providing services, but y'all are not giving me any money to do it. And they got some evidence, based on evidence, some findings based on evidence that the department at some level is not providing services. It might have triple services. The failure to develop resources, we all talked about those tier, what I call tier 2. I didn't make up the concept, but I did make up the term tier 2. And failure to provide transportation appropriate. Failure to provide good information to service providers. If you're not telling your service providers, that's going to be really, really, really critical. This privatization thing, and handing off a lot of your work. Because you got to tell them the problem is. You got to give them good information, or they're not going to be able to do their job. And you should have protocols for that. That's one thing we're working on our county, because we've really focused on the service provider thing over the last year at our stakeholder meetings. We've not done a good job providing information to our service providers or getting good information back. And that's the next piece, failure to follow up service providers, failure to obtain meaningful reports from service providers for hearings and reviews. And I don't want an attendance report. That's not what I want. I don't want to know if mom attended 14 out of 22 sessions. I want to know what happened there, what results were making. I want a prognosis. The failure to timely file revised case plans, evaluations, and other documentation necessary to conduct hearings. Let me just say this, I need to hold a second. Okay, say this. If what I heard since I've been here is true, then we're getting case plans that are in Nebraska, I think I can file with the court at any certain time, certainly not early in the process. In Georgia, it has to be done and filed with the court within 30 days. But if we're waiting 60 days, 90 days, 120 days to develop case plans, you gotta make reasonable efforts. And I would suggest to the judges, if you have federal law 60 days, that's federal law, 60 days to be a case plan. If you have a case plan that is not prepared, and I don't know how you know unless it's filed with the court, so you want to change the law and get it filed with the court. But however you find out that case plan is not developed within 60 days, then I would make a no reasonable efforts finding in every single case. Every single one of them. Because I don't know how you can argue that you're making reasonable efforts to effect unification if you wait more than 60 days, the federal mandate, to develop case plans. I just don't think that you can. And I think you need to do it quicker than that, you need to offer the services quicker than that, and you need to make no reasonable efforts findings if the agency Failure to expedite child support proceedings, a lot of times creating a stream of income is important to keep families together. We're supposed to look at the dads anyway, so let's find them together. Failure to communicate contents of the case plan. A lot of times when I send the case manager back to office very unhappy, I have a great relationship with the county director. She would call me and kind of ask me what happened. She wanted my side of what happened. And I would tell her my side of what happened. And she would say, well, I don't understand it because the case manager knew there was an issue. And I believe that. So one thing that they should do in terms of reasonable efforts, and the judge yesterday I know uses these may not be affidavits, but we have reasonable efforts affidavits that I require to be filed prior to every hearing or review. So that in the call of their office, they can make this list of everything they've done, so go back and view, and put it in a document. Now, the judge yesterday talked about getting it in writing, and may or may not be an affidavit. But we require reasonable efforts affidavits, so they can communicate with us. Failure to communicate, period. You know, if you're not communicating with parents, stay in the touch room, return the phone calls, you ain't making reasonable efforts, in my view. You can't say you're working in case, but everything is reasonable to get this family back together if the parent calls you with a question about the service of anything and you're not returning the phone call. Failure to identify and work with the family strength. These are examples of more failure to meet the needs of the child, failure to be prepared for hearing reviews, failure to comply with ICPC, failure to comply with policy standing report. Is you all familiar with what Florida's doing with ICPC? Is the state director still here? Somebody from the state office? Yeah. If y'all are not happy about ICPC, talk to Florida. They have solved the problem, and they're coming into Georgia to work with us. They really solved the problem. The question was asked if we can ship a package to Shanghai by FedEx, and I'll say UPS. UPS. I got it, John. And we can know at any point in time where that package is. Why can't we do that with our children? That's ICPC packages. So this is the UPS solution to ICPC. Failure to comply with policy standing orders and protocols. I've read your policy. Okay? I didn't do that much. I read your policy, and your agency's policy requires you to provide these services. It doesn't say provide them after adjudication. It says you got to provide the services to keep families together and to reunite families and to find finalize an alternative placement when you can't do that. And if you're not complying with your own policy, you're not making reasonable efforts. Just that simple. Now retired judge from Georgia used to keep the policy manual on his desk up there. He knew that policy, he used to work for it. He knew that policy was better than most case managers came in the room. If they fail to comply with their own policy, they're not making it. And maybe the failure to implement effective practices. Let's talk about this a minute. Is that 2 minutes, 5 minutes? Let's talk about this because you guys are working on some really good practices. As an example, this thing that you do, your free conference, your free hearing conference up front is a great practice. There are a lot of effective practices out there. This thing that I've got in place now about getting a psychological evaluation done within 2 weeks, that's a pretty good practice. So now that I have that in place, if the case manager, the liaison on Monday morning drops the ball, doesn't schedule that evaluation, and that time's not available, is that a failure to make reasonable efforts? Now, if you don't have it in place in your county, and it takes you 30 days or 60 days to get an evaluation, not getting it in 2 weeks may not be a failure to make reasonable efforts. But if through the court, through collaboration, on how you develop these resources, these effective practices, if they're in place and you don't use them, is that a failure to make reasonable efforts? Sure it is. It's an accessible resource that can help reunite this family that you're not accessing. So it's a failure to do it, it's a failure to make reasonable efforts. These are some examples. Failure to do concurrent planning, failure to develop concurrent plan, failure to implement concurrent plan, identify alternative placements, failure to counsel child alternative placements. Under fostering connections, I was a little unsure after our training yesterday in terms of how quickly you have to get your reference search done, but under fostering connections, there's no doubt about it. 30 days to get it done and send the notices out. And I would suggest that the court should exercise some oversight. It's not specifically required. I would suggest that you should exercise some oversight. I require certification from the department that comply with that and how to develop it. Failure to comply with 1522 requirements, that's just plain and simple. If you don't do that, then that's a failure to make reasonable efforts. If you fail to follow the law or your policy, clearly that's a failure to make reasonable About these two things very quickly, in terms of expediting adoptions, because that's one thing on your list. Again, you think you're doing a pretty good job. You run across the Judge Goody, Duval County, Florida. And I can send these orders to you if you're interested in them. But what he does is when the decision is made to move towards adoption, he has an order that requires certain recruitment efforts to be completed within 90 days. That includes the responsible case manager interviewing every case manager who's ever been involved with that child, school teachers, every service provider involved with the child, and a host of other people to try to identify prospective adoptive placements for the child. And that's done as soon as the decision is made. The question was asked, is that prejudging your case if you enter an order requiring that? And the presiding judge of the Court of Appeals in Michigan says, not if you do it in every case. Do it in individual cases, it may be. Do that as a matter of practice. The other is that when the petition for termination is filed, then he enters an order giving the agency 30 days to compile every piece of paper that's required to turn the case over to pursue the adoption, except the certified copy of the termination. So that when that's done, all the paperwork is in place. That's good work. We've already talked about some of those in your findings. You got to document your findings. That specifically required, this came out of the final rule, it's in your materials. Written reference application, a good way to do it, form orders, a checklist, but you've got to do that. You really need to document your reasonable reference findings. Of course, you're given an opportunity to cure. If I make a no reasonable reference finding, I get agency 30 days to institute services, and they come back to court and satisfy me to get back on track. I can enter an order, they can swap the services back. Now, I enter an order directing them not to draw down 40 funding if I make the wrong reference finding. Issue would have to be that. There are exceptions to it. We're going to kind of talk about these. I want to leave you with one thing. That's my baby. I don't know if you're still or not. Never lose sight of the prize, and that's two meanings. I mean, children, that's the prize. That's never lose sight of that. Second, look how she's concentrating on everything. That's what we need to do. That's how we need to focus on work. This very quickly, I wrote this on the plane 4 years ago after I left the summit in Minnesota. The Lord gave to me a thing. Their belongings in a bag, their hearts on the sleeve are tucked securely away. Their future is not their own, but held in the hands of those who do not know them. Their worlds asunder, security and mistrust are constant companions. They come to us looking for answers, for understanding, for hope, for resolution. What we give them will determine who they are and who they will forever be. Equally as important, what they become because of their having passed our way will define our lives and our place in history. We have chosen as our lives work to involve ourselves in the lives of the families and children. And our handprints are all over, for the good or for the bad. God bless you for the work you do, and I appreciate your attention. No questions.